Hi, I'm David Barr Kirtley, author of the book Save Me Please and Other Stories, and welcome to episode 612 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Our guest today is David P. Silverman. He's one of America's best-known atheist activists, famous for his debates with Fox News hosts Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity, and he also organized the 2012 Reason Rally in Washington, D.C., the largest gathering of atheists in world history. He served as president of American Atheists and executive director of Atheist Alliance International, and he currently serves as advisory board chair of Atheists for Liberty. And in this interview, we'll be discussing his nonfiction book Fighting God, an Atheist Manifesto for a Religious World, and his new science fiction novella Darkshiner. And now here's our interview with David P. Silverman. All right, so we're here with David P. Silverman. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, David. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, so first of all, how did you get interested in science fiction?
Oh, well, that goes all the way back. I've been a science fiction person since I was a kid. I used to watch Doctor Who when I was a little kid and Star Trek. That was it. When I was growing up, it was Doctor Who and Star Trek. I'm one of those kids that saw Star Trek every day when he came back from school. And I kind of, adapted into it. I was very into it. And then when Star Wars came out, and when that kind of changed everything for me as a kid, because that just blew me away. And I am one of those people that was always on the fence between Star Trek or Star Wars. I'm kind of both. I've always been that way.
And so was it mostly the movies and TV shows, or were you into novels as well?
No, it was always movies and TV shows. I wasn't much of a reader as a kid, not into science fiction reading. But I saw every movie and watched every episode. And sometimes it got me into a little bit of trouble, but I was pretty into it for a period of time.
So when you say sometimes it got you into a little bit of trouble, what do you mean?
Well, I remember sneaking out of Hebrew school when I was maybe 10 years, maybe more than that. When Star Trek Motion Picture came out, I snuck out of Hebrew school to go see it at my friend's house because he had cable, and I got caught.
So what was the punishment?
No, the punishment was being yelled at by my mother a lot. So I didn't. That was pretty much it. But I got caught. I snuck out of Hebrew school a lot.
So were you already having kind of doubts about religion at that point?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been an atheist since I was like 6 years old. And I've never been closeted. And I told my mother all the time, and my mother did not care. She made me go to Hebrew school anyways. And I did the whole thing. And I gave a perfect bar mitzvah. And people gave me a bunch of money. And that was when I realized, I basically went up on and gave a perfect bar mitzvah and lied. Right. And I was told to lie by my mother, say the words, do the thing, say the words. And I got money for it. And that was kind of an important event in my evolution as an atheist, my bar mitzvah. One would not normally expect that, but that's what happened.
I wanted to ask you, though. So, so you're watching Star Trek and you're having these doubts. Did those two things play a role? Because Star Trek presents this portrait of the future in which humanity has sort of transcended religion. So did that influence you?
It did. I really locked onto Spock. I really locked onto the Spock character and how he used logic to get through everything. And here I was being a logical kid looking religion in the face. And yeah, that was a big, I say that was a big influence on me. That's my line from Trekkies. I'll tell you that story in a bit. But yeah, Spock, the character of Spock, the logic that he brought, actually brought the concept that I can take logic as a primary process into my brain. It wasn't, nobody taught me in school to be logical. Nobody taught me at home to be logical. Spock taught me to be logical, which is a shame because being logical is something that kids should be taught in school, but I wasn't being taught that. I wasn't getting that message from anyone. And Spock kind of brought that awareness into my head.
Well, yeah, I did definitely want to hear the Trekkies story because I just rewatched Trekkies, and there's this clip of you dressed as a Borg at a Star Trek convention. So tell us the story about how you ended up on camera there.
Okay, so I like my Star Trek, but I was really into this other show called Babylon 5. And those of you who watched it, if you were there for the time, It was a really, really great show, possibly one of the best science fiction shows ever made. And I was super into it. And there was this convention in California that was a combination Babylon 5 Star Trek convention. And I went to it for Babylon 5 alone. Star Trek was there. I'd been to my share of Star Trek conventions. I've seen it all before. This was a Babylon 5 convention as far as I was concerned. And so there were 2 tracks for this convention, and I stayed on, there was one for Star Trek, there was one for Babylon 5, and I stayed on the Babylon 5 track 100% of the time because that's what I was there for. Except one time, when there was literally nothing scheduled for Babylon 5. And there was one session happening over on Star Trek. The Michael Westmore makeup demonstration was on Star Trek, and it was the plenary event of the convention. There was nothing else happening. And for that reason alone, I went to this on the Star Trek side. And the auditorium was packed. And Michael Westmore, the guy from Star Trek, the guy who won the Academy Award, I think, for makeup at Star Trek, comes out on stage. And he looks at me, and he points to me, and he brings me up on stage, right out of the audience.
And this was just random. He didn't know you or anything.
Just random.
Yeah.
Just random. And then a woman named Belinda Bryant, a makeup artist, made me into a Star Trek Borg on stage. I was so the picture that you see of me, that's actual Star Trek makeup. That's actual Star Trek props from one of the movies. And then I was approached by a guy named Roger Nygaard, who asked me if I wanted to be in a movie. This was 1996. I had never been on camera before. I said, yeah, I want to be in a movie. So he put me on a chair, and he put the lights on me, and he focused on me, and I got a little nervous, and he said, so you watched a lot of Star Trek when you were growing up, didn't you? And I said, yes. He said, well, would you say that? I watched a lot of Star Trek when I was growing up. So who was your favorite character on Star Trek? Spock. So he had a big influence on you growing up, didn't he? Yeah. Would you say that? Well, Spock had a big influence on me growing up. And that's what you see in this movie. And so I have this fantastic, I was able to go to a movie theater, a real movie theater near my house, sit in one of the seats. My voice, my face, my name is in the credits. It was awesome. I even got an IMDb entry out of it. And just to put a cherry on top, the guy who did Trekkies, Roger Nygaard, we worked together again later on. When I was president of American Atheists, he did a movie called The Nature of Existence. And I worked with him on that, didn't recognize him. He kind of threw out, yeah, I did this movie once called Trekkies. And that's when we realized that we'd worked together before.
Well, hopefully this interview will be a little bit more interesting than that interview was.
It was great, man. What a life experience. What a life experience.
I'll say actually Trekkies was kind of foundational to this podcast coming into existence because my friend John Joseph Adams and I, we started the podcast together. You know, we watched Trekkies and we were so aghast at how it made science fiction fans, how science fiction fans came across in the documentary that we're like, no, we got to do something to put it out there that science fiction fans can be a little bit more normal and,
that
cool.
was that movie. I believe that was before Galaxy Quest too. I believe that was before. So it was really, Star Trek fans were really kind of fringe and geeky still back then.
Mm-hmm. And it was like really back then, I mean, the internet was very, very much in its infancy and there, like pretty much 100% of how the normal person's view of a science fiction fan was from Trekkies. Like that was all that they were going to see. So it was,
yeah, they didn't show the best of us.
But then, I mean, actually, I know you went to other science fiction conventions too, because then another thing that happened, this was, I don't know, this was maybe around 2005 or so, somewhere around there, as I was hanging out with my friend John at a science fiction convention. I don't remember now which one. We used to go to a lot. But he pointed you out and he said, oh, that's David Silverman. And at the time I didn't yet know who you were. And he said, oh yeah, he's like a big deal in the atheist, movement. And those are sort of the two great passions of my life for, atheism and science fiction. So I was like, okay, I got to talk to that guy someday.
We have a lot in common.
That's my kind of guy.
Yeah, we have a lot in common. So I don't remember. Do you remember what convention that was at?
I can't. I don't remember. I mean,
No, I do go to a lot of. I did go to a lot of them. I was a frequent guest at a lot of conventions, especially on the East Coast.
I went to like 100 around that time, so I don't know which one it was. But
Okay.
But yeah. But say more about like what kind of involvement did you have with science fiction fandom?
Well, it was one of those things. I started going to conventions in college. When I went to college, I locked on to the Doctor Who crowd in college. And we started going to Doctor Who conventions, Star Trek conventions. I started meeting stars. I met Larry Niven. I met, James Doohan. I started getting really into going to conventions and meeting people and shaking hands and getting autographs. I had that whole big phase. And what happened was when I got popular in American Atheists, the people at those science fiction conventions, just like yourself, and just like myself, we had a lot of commonality. And so they started to ask me to speak and appear at science fiction conventions. And so Balticon, Aresia, a couple other conventions that I can think of used to have me come speak as a panelist or just as a visitor, just to, bring something to it. And so it really has been a long trek for me as far as science fiction is concerned. It's something that's been a part of my life for my whole life.
Yeah, actually, speaking of Larry Niven, he was my dad's favorite science fiction author when I was growing up. So I've read a lot of Larry Niven. We just on this podcast recently, we did kind of a 3-part episode reviewing the best of Larry Niven, the collection of all his best short stories. So yeah, were you a Larry Niven fan, or how did you end up talking
Not
to
really
him?
a Larry Niven fan, but I knew him. I knew his work. I was more of a Douglas Adams fan. I became actual friends with Douglas Adams after a while before he died. That's a pretty good story.
Yeah.
You might be aware of the Douglas Adams interview because it's the Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. You might be aware of the Douglas Adams interview where he calls himself a radical atheist.
Yeah,
and he says, "Yeah, so I conducted that interview."
Oh, wow.
And that's where I met him. That's how I met him, and we stayed friends for a while. And that interview was published posthumously in the Salmon of Doubt.
So how did that interview get set up in the first place?
I was working as a professional inventor at Bell Labs, and he came to speak at Bell Labs for something completely different. And I pursued him because I'd heard that he was an atheist, and this was 1990 something, middle of 1990s, and atheism was very it was still very out of vogue. It was still very fringe, for lack of a better word. I said that before, but he was all about interviewing with me. I said, okay, I'm from American Atheists. I want to interview you for a magazine. And he said, yes, let's do it. And we kept in touch. We did that whole interview, and then we kept in touch afterward. And after he moved to the States, well, he called me and asked me for advice when he moved to the States. And then, as I'm sure you know, not long after he moved to the States, he unfortunately died. But he and I, I'm sad for his loss on many reasons, not just because he was a great guy and a super friendly guy, but I really liked him. I really liked him. I'd hope that we could be friends for a long time.
It's funny when you talk about pursuing Douglas Adams, that reminds me of a story where my friend Tom, he's like a huge Douglas Adams fan, even more so than I am. And he got an opportunity to do, like, as a college student, to do like a radio fellowship in the UK.
Wow.
And so then he just looked up Douglas Adams in the phone book and called him, cold called him and said, hi, and made it sound like this was for the, fellowship, but it wasn't. He just wanted to talk to him. Could I interview you? And Douglas Adams said, sure. So he just went over to Douglas Adams' apartment or whatever and interviewed.
Oh my God, that's great.
So yeah, we're all big Douglas Adams fans here, obviously.
As we should be.
Yeah. My parents actually were big Douglas Adams. They had the BBC radio drama, original, broadcast on tape. Yeah,
nice.
Because they had heard it. I think it was like on NPR or something. Or was the first time it was broadcast in the States, and so they had heard it, and so they bought it. And back then, audiobooks were like these big plastic boxes of cassette tapes, and they cost like $100. So you didn't have very many of them. So every road trip, we would just listen to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So I've heard it, 50 times probably, something like that.
Nice. Yeah, that's where I first got introduced to him, on the tapes.
Yeah, I love it. It's such a great radio. Like, that's my favorite way to experience the story is the radio drama. But that's cool. Yeah. So obviously, you did a lot of science fiction stuff. And then I also just read your book, Fighting God. And I thought it was interesting because you say when you're, if you're an atheist and you're in the closet and you have advice for coming out to friends and family and so on. And you say, advice, this is a quote, advice to pick which friends to tell first. Look for any association with science and science fiction. So
that's right.
I thought that was funny, but that strikes me as very sound advice. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're witness to that. You're proof of that, right? If you go to a science fiction event, you're going to find a lot of atheists. You're not going to find very many haters of atheists.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that, as I'm a lifelong atheist, so, just that was one of the things that attracted me to science fiction, was that it just seemed like this little island of sanity.
Yeah, exactly. If we can envision a world without religion, we can probably make it happen. At least that's what I thought.
Well, so I also just wanted to ask you about this line from Fighting God. You say, quote, "Religion sucks, so I fight it with my greatest weapon, words. Parentheses, never violence, because violence is the weapon of the weak and the wrong."
Yes.
And that reminds me a lot of a famous Asimov quote that violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. And I was wondering if you think there was any conscious or
there's probably a connection there. There's probably a connection there. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There's probably a connection there, but I mean, I really feel strongly that the idea that when you fight, that when you hunt, and when you call names, this is one of the reasons that I don't have a lot of respect for the woke left right now, because when you call names, it's the refuge of the weak. When you fight, it's the refuge of the weak. If you're right, you can conquer it with words. That's why I was successful on the stage, because, newsflash, atheism is factually correct. And so if you're factually correct, you can't really lose unless your own information is wrong. So it makes it obvious that when somebody says, well, you're a this or you're a that, or I'm going to punch you and hit you for saying that, that is the last refuge of the weak. That's what they do as a last resort. And that's exactly what it means. And Asimov was right.
Yeah, I majored in sort of political philosophy in college, and one of the books that you read for that is On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. Which I really think is the most important book ever written. I wish everyone was assigned to read it. But it's just it was sort of the I mean, in the particular section I'm thinking about here, he goes through all the arguments for why censorship and silencing people is both always morally wrong and also always counterproductive. And I would just strongly...
Well, it's counterproductive for the people. It's very productive for the people in charge.
Well, the thing is that when you use coercion, there's sort of two approaches to argumentation: is persuasion and coercion. And whenever you use coercion, whenever people are clamming up and not saying what they really think because they're afraid of getting fired or whatever, or something like that, this pressure just builds up inside them, and they become more and more and more and more extreme in the opposite direction that you want them to. I would just really strongly encourage everyone to read On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. It's just an indispensable book. But speaking of indispensable books, that brings us to Darkshiner by David P.
Another indispensable book. This is a very indispensable book.
So this is your first fiction that you've published. Had you been writing fiction for a while, or was this kind of something that you just got into recently?
This is my first fiction ever. This is my first work of fiction ever. And it comes from... It basically comes from little pieces of my life that this story has has come through. When I was a professional inventor at Bell Labs, I became acquainted with Arno Penzias, who discovered the Big Bang and won a Nobel Prize for it. When I was in American Atheists, I fought religion with truth, but then things changed, and the atheist movement went woke. And then I started to talk with Peter Boghossian a few years ago about the battle not just between religion and truth, but the battle between good and truth. And is it there's a lot of fertile ground there as far as the battle between, telling the truth, what if it does harm? And this book kind of came into being in my head over some period of time because of these things. And I also saw this one interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson that I'm not going to describe, but it kind of put everything together. And I did some research on this story that I had in my head, and it seems like the story itself is novel. It seems like nobody's done this before. And that's why I wrote it, because it looks like this whole idea behind Darkshiner is actually novel. I may be wrong, but I haven't seen any evidence that's of somebody doing this before. And that's why I wrote it. And that's why I'm really proud of it. That's how the story came into being.
Yeah, well, so tell us about the idea. So it's set on a planet, like an alien planet called Umbra. So
Yep.
Tell us about life on Umbra.
So life on Umbra is it's a little bit different. It's an advanced civilization that orbits and worships a singular sun in an otherwise starless void. So there's never been any stars in the sky. It's always been that way until the Darkshiner appears, and everything changes. And it creates a situation where good goes against truth, and it creates a situation where religion, which used to be unchallenged, becomes challenged. And it really, I don't want to give away any more about it, because obviously I don't want to give away anything about it. But the idea behind Darkshiner is what happens when religion and science agree completely until they don't.
Yeah, and I agree. I have read a lot of science fiction, obviously, and I've never seen this exact idea before, which I think is a really great idea. I won't go into too much detail about it if you don't want to get into too many spoilers. I mean, there are certain similarities to other, science fiction, like Isaac Asimov's Nightfall. I think it's kind of in the vein with that. There's actually a section of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy where it talks about these aliens who have grown up on a planet in some sort of dense nebula, and so they've never seen, the sky's always just been black for them. And so when a spaceship lands on their planet, they're looking at the ground, they're looking all around. It never occurred to them that to look up before, because nothing had ever been up there.
Right. I remember that. I hadn't actually thought of that.
But yeah, I mean, when you've read as much science fiction as I have, you can find some sort of connection to anything. But it was actually making me think, I don't know if you know this story, but how Asimov's Nightfall came about was John W. Campbell, the editor of Astounding magazine. He had this idea that he thought was really good for a science fiction story, which is, what if there are people who had never seen the stars before and they see the stars for the first time? And so he gave that idea to Asimov, and he gave this exact same idea to Heinlein. And he would do this a lot. He would give the same idea to multiple authors. And then Asimov wrote it as Nightfall and Heinlein wrote it as Universe. And they're two completely different stories, which just goes to show, that there's just so much more to a story than just the idea. And you can give the exact same idea to multiple authors and they'll turn out completely different works.
And that's good writing. And let's hope that's good writing. That's what makes it good. That's what makes it interesting.
But so I'm curious. So you'd never written any fiction before, and you sit down to write your first fiction ever. Kind of what was that experience like? And did it go well at first? Was it a struggle at first?
Well, I mean, the process was a lot of fun. This one, when it came to, of course, Fighting God, I wrote by hand. This one, I used AI to help me generate the original text. And I am not sorry for that at all. Because like I said, I've never written fiction before. And I had this story that I liked, and I've never written fiction before, right? And I know that writing fiction is very different from writing nonfiction. Writing nonfiction is just yelling at the page. Okay, all you have to do is be right. Writing fiction is a completely different animal. I have an MBA. What do I know about writing flowery dialogue? I don't. So my choice was to use an AI to help me out or to hire a ghostwriter. And I chose to start with the AI. I ended up, and I worked a lot on this. This was a lot of fun. First of all, it was a lot more fun than writing it by hand. Going back and forth with the AI and then trading between one AI and the other. I used actually 3 different AIs and 3 different humans to perfect this work. Okay. So 3 different AIs plus 3 different editors plus myself going over this thing over and over and over again to make sure there's no plot holes, to make sure that everything's covered, to make sure that it all makes sense.
Could you say what sort of prompts were you giving the AI? Like, could you? Just
I was just talking to it. I was just talking to it. So I started out. I say, okay, I have this story. Here's the beginning. Here's the middle. Here's the end. Here's the thing. And the AI says, okay, well, here's an outline. So I say, all right, well, that outline looks bad. Let's change this. AI says, okay, how about this? All right, let's look at that. Let's look at first chapter. Write the first chapter. AI writes the first chapter. It sucks. Okay. And so you have to go over it and over it and over it again with the AI until, and then what you would usually do, I would go over it 2 or 3 times, and then I would just take the text out, bring it into an editor and fix it myself. And then I would bring it back into the AI and go chapter 2. And that's how I built the book. And
had you heard of anyone using this process before, or this is just something that you kind of came up with on your own?
I heard that people were doing it. I didn't, I never fancied myself as a fiction writer. I've never been a fiction writer before. I just wanted to get my story out. I wanted to get my story out here. And I thought it was a great experience. And I'm really happy with the final product. I had heard that there were people writing books this way, but I had also heard that people were just writing books by going into an AI and saying, okay, write a book, and then just publishing it. That's not what this is. This was a lot of work and effort on my part, as well as the editors. And I'm really happy with the fact that this is a tight, clean, and no AI fluff type of book. It's tight.
So you said there were 3. Why did you use 3 different AIs? Were the different ones giving you different things that the other ones weren't?
Yeah. So the AIs, you gotta manage them just like they manage you. If you work for a long time when Gemini, I made I did most of the generation was on Gemini. I'm like, all right, I went through all of this with the tech editor and the line editor and the copy editor, and Gemini says, yes, this is good to go. And then I send it over to X, and X says, this is pretty good. And then I put it over to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT says, no, this is not good. And so I had to get this to the point in my mind where all 3 of them said, yes, this is ready to go. And that's why there was a third editing. And that's why the book is especially tight.
And then you said you had 3 human editors as well. Could you say more about what role they played?
So I had 2 line editors. I had Tom Melchior and
Peter Lloyd.
Peter Lloyd, thank you.
I have it in my notes here.
So. Okay, good, thank you. Yes, they did the copy editor, and Dr. Kunal Lobo made sure that my tech was correct.
And how did you get hooked up with them? So
Tom Melchior is the former editor of American Atheist magazine, so I knew him from way back. He actually used to work for me back when I was president of American Atheists. And Kunal Lobo and Kunal has kind of kept in touch with me since my book tour. We connected during my book tour. He kind of kept in touch with me. He just got his PhD in astrophysics. And
just for listeners, this is the book tour for Fighting God. So this would have been 10 years ago.
Yes, I'm sorry. That was the book tour for Fighting God. The book tour for Darkshiner is still being planned. But So I had this. I had the asset of Dr. Lobo in my pocket because he was an astrophysicist ready to help me and make sure that all of the tech that's in this book is correct. And then I had two editors go over this and make sure that, like I said, there's no fluff. I took out a lot of words.
Well, and I thought, I mean, the science seemed really solid in this to
Thank
me.
you.
I mean, I'm not a subject matter expert, but all the stuff about the radio telescopes and the cosmic microwave background radiation and just the procedures and the way that the scientist characters talk to each other, it's all seemed really solid to me.
Good. Thank you. I'm glad. Thank you so much.
Is there anything in particular that Dr. Lobo, do you remember anything where he's like, no, you got to change this or add this or anything like that?
Actually, I was quite surprised that Dr. Lobo said most of the stuff was right. Most of the stuff that AI generated was right. So I wanted to make sure, and I don't want to get into the details here because I don't want to spoil anything, but I wanted to make sure that the details of the book, the story, were actually coherent. Okay. And my knowledge, I'm not a scientist. I guess I read some science sometimes, but I'm not a scientist. It seemed right to me, but the AI generated stuff that was beyond me, and Dr. Lobo said, yeah, that's all right. So most of the stuff was actually correct. I was surprised to say. He made a few changes, and he taught me a few things about the difference between how radio telescopes work and how to tell if a certain element is in a deteriorating star, that kind of stuff. He gave me some lessons on that, some information on that, taught me some stuff. So I actually learned quite a bit in writing this book, which was fun, a lot.
Yeah, like elements of the periodic table we're talking about that you would see with the radio telescope. Well, you mentioned that you took this tour of the Great Horn antenna. Did any details from that find their way into this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's all part of it. Because Arno Penzias discovered the Big Bang with a horn antenna right where I used to live and work. So I had this association with Dr. Penzias because I wanted to try and get him into an atheist club that I was forming at Bell Labs, and emails were brand new back then. We all got our emails all at once, and it was first initial. It was exactly like what you described before. It was first initial, last name at lucent.com. So I'm like, I can just email Arno Penzias. And I just did. And we had a nice conversation going back and forth, and I did visit the horn antenna. I did get to see it, and that is absolutely part of the Darkshiner lore.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, and so the protagonist is kind of a cross between Arno Penzias and Lawrence Krauss.
Oh, yeah. Lawrence has been on the show, so that's cool.
He's a good guy, friend of mine, and it's kind of there's a lot of him in there too.
Okay, nice. I was curious to ask. I guess this won't get into spoilers, but I hope it won't. You can tell me if it does.
Okay.
But some of the names of the characters, like the main character, the scientist you mentioned, his name is Dr. Eris Thorne.
Yeah. And
his wife is Lyra, which is the name of the main character in Philip Pullman's The Golden Compass. I was just wondering if that might have been a conscious or unconscious reference.
Nope, that was not. That's a nice association, but that's a miss.
Okay. Yeah. The religious leader Sira, I'm guessing is a reference to Cyril of Alexandria.
No, very interesting question, but no, it's. I didn't pick that name. The AI did.
Okay. I was sure that had, because if listeners don't know, so Cyril of Alexandria was a Christian bishop or something who kind of oversaw the burning of the Library of Alexandria. And his followers murdered Hypatia, the famous Greek mathematician. There's a great movie called Agora that's about this. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely check that out. But
I'll check it out.
I could definitely see some thematic links there.
Nice.
Well, tell me about. So this book has. I mean, you've mentioned Peter Boghossian earlier in this interview, he's also been on the podcast.
Yeah.
But the book has 3 cover blurbs on it. One from Peter Boghossian, one from Lucian Greaves, and one from Stephen Law.
Yeah.
And I was just curious if you wanted to talk about, how they came to read the book and why you wanted their opinions on it in particular.
Well, Peter obviously was part of it because it was my discussion with Peter, not in this most recent interview, but a few years ago, where we started talking about the argument between truth versus good. And that kind of brought this story along the way. So I really wanted to get something from Peter on there. Lucian Greaves and I are friends, and we've kept in touch. And I just have just a tremendous amount of respect for him. And I think that he was, I frankly think that he is very underrated in the atheist movement. I think that he should be more highly regarded because he's smart. And so for that reason, I wanted him on there. And Stephen Law and I have become pretty good friends. We met a couple of years ago in Helsinki. We kept in touch. We had a really good time. And, I had toyed with him about writing a book with him. We didn't get to do that, but
like a nonfiction book or a fiction?
Yeah,
book?
we had talked about writing a humanist book together. I have very strong opinions about humanism, and we had talked about writing a humanism book together, which I did not write. At least I haven't written yet, and that's why I wanted him on this one as well.
I mean, Lucian Greaves, if people don't know, is the founder of the Satanic Temple. It's this sort of activist group that does advocacy for church-state separation.
They're a great job. They do a great work. They really do.
Yeah, I interviewed, there was a documentary about them called Hail Satan that came out a couple of years ago. I interviewed the director of that, Penny Lane, in episode 361, if people want to learn more about that. Is Lucian Greaves or Stephen Law, are they science fiction fans? Do you know, or were they just kind of interested in seeing what you can
I don't know if Stephen is a science fiction fan. I believe Lucian is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know about Stephen.
Certainly, Peter Boghossian is a massive science fiction fan. If you want to listen to my interview with him, he has watched every science fiction TV show, like in the history of the universe.
The man has taste in class.
That was episode 396, if anyone wants to go check that out. I mean, I was just astounded at how many science fiction shows. I mean, I guess he watches science fiction shows. He said every night before he goes to bed, he watches science fiction TV. So there was this long list of shows he had watched. I couldn't believe how extensive it was.
Wow.
But actually, so there was so I watched, he interviewed you a couple years ago, and there was a funny exchange from that I wanted to highlight. So you're talking, and you said, quote, "So a wise man once said, everybody does everything for exactly the same reason. You think it's a good idea at the time, all right?" Do you know who said that, Pete? And Peter, who's a philosophy professor, he says, "Socrates said that in the Theaetetus." And you say, Joe Michael Straczynski, Londo, Babylon 5.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't Londo, though, was it? Yeah, it was Londo. Yeah.
I'm quoting you directly. So
okay.
I hope it was Londo. But do you want to say a little bit, like, do you remember, I don't know if you remember that exchange or not.
I used to love Babylon 5 because of so many reasons, but one of them was because of the dialogue. Okay. I love the dialogue of Babylon 5, and there was this one scene where Londo says, everybody does everything for exactly the same reason. It seems like a good idea at the time. And it's just one of those things that stuck with me. There's dozens of them, though. I mean, just think about it. If you go back through Babylon 5, there's a lot of really great lines. That's just one of them.
I have to confess, I used to catch Babylon 5 when it was, just randomly when it was on TV, but I've never watched the whole thing from beginning to end. I did.
You missed out.
I did interview J. Michael Straczynski a couple years ago, but I really want to watch the whole thing. It's just like so many hours that I would need to devote to it. But yeah, everyone says it's just, like you said, one of the just greatest science fiction shows ever.
Yeah, and you don't have to watch the 5th season. You just have to watch the first 4. You don't have to watch the 5th season.
Okay.
Because it was a 5-season show. This is back in the day when shows were like this. It was a 5-season show. and Straczynski wrote a 5-season show, but in the middle of the 4th season, it was canceled. And so they had to wrap up everything in the 4th season, and then it was extended.
Oh, God.
So like the 5th season so the end of the 4th season is just awesome. And the 5th season is tacked on the superfluous. It's like, hey, we're going to do something else here. So you don't have to watch that part.
I remember when I interviewed him, he talked about, decades later after Babylon 5 going into meetings with Hollywood executives. And they would say, we're really looking to do a 5-season arc. Do you think that you could pull that off? And I think his quote was, I invented the motherfucker.
He did indeed.
That's how I remember it anyway.
He did indeed. He invented the 5-season arc. He did. It was game changing. Everything else up until then was episodic. There was no beginning, middle, and end to a science fiction series. That was completely brand new, and it was awesome. And I was addicted. Oh man, I was addicted. Woo.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely hoping to watch that one of these days. Hopefully, I'll get a chance. Okay, so have you been watching or reading any science fiction lately that you want to recommend?
No, I haven't watched or read any science fiction. I usually don't read fiction. I usually read nonfiction. Right now, I'm reading Marcus Aurelius. I don't read much fiction. And as far as fiction movies are concerned, I mean, we're done. Are we done? I wonder if there's going to be any more good fiction movies. I mean, Deadpool and Wolverine was fun, but it wasn't exactly highbrow. I haven't seen. Star Wars is gone. Star Trek is gone. Doctor Who is gone. The answer to your question is no, David. I haven't heard of anything good recently. Have you?
Well, if you look back through our archives, you can see which episodes which TV shows we've reviewed, which I thought I really liked Pluribus. That was the last one I watched. But so you're not watching Starfleet Academy, I take it?
No, I'm not watching Starfleet Academy. They had a cadet that swallowed her comm badge, and they want me to take it seriously. I'm not going to.
I haven't watched it. The trailer looked really dire.
Yeah, I mean, Star Trek left. Star Trek is not Star Trek anymore. Star Wars is not Star Wars anymore. Doctor Who is not Doctor Who anymore. It's all gone. It's all left. But hey, anybody out there in Hollywood, I've got plenty of money to spend if you guys want to start creating good stuff again.
I was going to say, a couple of years ago, I got a chance to interview Alex Kurtzman. He's like the Star Trek showrunner.
Yeah.
And so I pitched him my Star Trek idea, which I think is fantastic. So my idea was a hot-headed human crew member, a la, like Kirk from Star Trek 2009, like that kind of person.
Okay.
Gets assigned to be on board a Vulcan ship where everybody else is a Vulcan. And the arc of the series is him learning to be more logical, like him learning to control his emotions, him learning to think rationally, and so on. Because you have these characters like Data or Spock, where it's all about, they are logical, but then they have to like get in touch with their feelings and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be interesting to take the opposite
I like that idea.
And also like teach, critical thinking skills in the course of the show. So
I like that idea because the Vulcans could debate the emotion and they would learn from him as well. But because they would be in the majority, they wouldn't be like converting to be more emotional. They'd just be like dissecting it logically.
Yeah,
that sounds like fun.
It would be interesting, I think, too, to have like different Vulcans. So you would see gradations in their personalities, even though they're all kind of stoic and logical. So yeah, I mean, he seemed to think it was a good idea. He said he'd take it to the writer's room, but I don't know. I'm still holding out hope for that one.
Well, hopefully they'll make Darkshiner into a Black Mirror episode, and I'll be very happy.
Yeah, no, that would be cool. Okay, this line from Fighting God jumped out at me. I thought it would be of interest to our audience. Quote, Churches cost America about $71 billion per year in nonprofit property tax exemptions alone. That's enough for 28 missions to Mars per year.
Yeah, that sounds about
that's
right.
That's a lot of missions to Mars.
That's a lot of missions to Mars.
I would settle for one mission to Mars.
The amount of money that we don't as a society make because we have decided that the club that prays to a god is somehow exempt from taxes because they pray to a god. That action, not doing charity, not doing work, not making good, just a club that prays to God. And now all of their property is tax exempt. And we're not talking about churches. We're talking about huge swaths of land. That's a lot of money. And yeah, we would make a lot more money as a country if we tax the church and tax their properties normally. I mean, I don't have a problem with a nonprofit organization that does nonprofit work, that does good work, being property tax exempt. I ran an organization that was property tax exempt, but we actually did something. We didn't just actually gather and talk. We actually did perform activism and outreach. So I think if the churches had a choice, and this is what I was going for in that place, that churches should have a choice of being tax exempt and doing a minimum amount of community service or not being tax exempt. And only property that is vital for the community service should be tax exempt. That just makes sense.
Yeah, and I think most people probably have some awareness that churches get these special tax breaks. But they're like, it's probably not that much, But then 28 Mars missions per year, that really puts that into perspective. Just the degree to which we as a society are subsidizing superstition.
And that's America only. And that's America only. And the only reason that we subsidize it is because they pray to a god. If they didn't pray to a god, they wouldn't get the subsidies. They wouldn't get the things. That's how America favors religion. That's how America gives a preference to religion.
Yeah. So if you want a Mars mission like me, just keep that in mind.
Elon, are you listening?
Okay. So also lately you have been the advisory board chair for Atheist for Liberty.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you want to say anything about kind of why did you want to be involved with them, and why should people take an interest in that group?
And I think really Atheist for Liberty is a great organization, and it's kind of a vital organization because the rest of the atheist movement has pretty much just gone woke. And when I say gone woke, what I mean is they have become simply leftist organizations. If you go to American Atheists, to American Humanist Association, to any of them, there is not a Republican to be seen. There is not a centrist to be seen. They are leftists. And when they and
also, I mean, it's not like the Republicans and centrists left voluntarily. They were pushed. They were pushed off the planet.
They were pushed off. And so right now there is one American organization American atheist organization that is paying attention and soliciting and working with the right and the center to create atheism. Because what we're seeing now is, and this is something that I predicted would happen this is something I predicted. I talked about it in Fighting God. When I talk about going to CPAC, we're doing that to insulate the right from becoming very, very religious. Well, what's happened? Okay. What's happened is the atheist movement completely, like you said, pushed out the right and the center. And now what's happening on the right?
And the center left,
center left. And now what's happening on the right? A rise in religion, because they see atheism as a leftist thing. And there's only one organization fighting that, and that's Atheist for Liberty. And that's why I'm very happy to be involved with them.
Yeah, and it's just kind of a shame if you're, concerned about issues like church-state separation, if all the atheist groups, whatever you think of left-wing activism, it's not church-state separation.
Right. Right. It's not, and it's not atheist. It's not atheist normalcy either. You're not doing anything. They're not. Unfortunately, they're not atheist organizations anymore. They're just organizations of atheist leftists, and it's a shame to see. It's enraging, as a person who dedicated 25 years of his life to making an atheist movement that was strong and diverse. And now to see it all throw that aside and just say, no, 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 we're just leftists now, and we're going to just say leftist things and not even say atheist things anymore. It's very, very disconcerting. And that's why when Thomas Sheedy founded Atheists for Liberty, I guess you could say follow in my footsteps, he started, soliciting CPAC. He started going to the conservatives, and he really is the only one doing it. And Atheists for Liberty is the only organization doing this now. So like right now in America, there is one organization targeting the center left and right, and center left and to the right of center left. And as far as atheism is concerned, there's one. Okay. Everybody else is telling them to go away. And that's the vast majority of the country. So that's why Atheists for Liberty is something that's near and dear to my heart. I hope everybody supports it.
Yeah, I think that's really important to have atheist groups that aren't just for the far left. So I think that's good. I did notice, so there's somebody in the group called Justin Vakula.
Yeah.
And he does a podcast called Stoic Solutions.
Yeah.
And I was noticing that he has episodes on sci-fi and Dungeons and Dragons, and I guess he goes to a lot of Dungeons and Dragons conventions. So he seems like, again, my kind of person. But I was just wondering, have you ever talked to him about?
Oh, I know Justin
fiction?
very well. Justin and I go back years. He's a I don't think he'll mind me saying that, he's a professional gambler. He makes money gambling. It's super interesting to talk to him. And he travels around, and he's got the hurdy-gurdy travel podcast as well. These are great people. Really, the Atheists for Liberty's group are just great, normal people. And that's why I love hanging out with them.
I've never been to a Dungeons and Dragons convention specifically. Did he ever talk about those?
No, I haven't talked to him about that. I played Dungeons and Dragons back in high school, but back when I was ignoring my Hebrew school requirement, I was playing D&D, but I haven't played it since then. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't remember much right now.
I guess whenever I talk to somebody and they mention D&D, I always ask if they have any memorable D&D stories, like anything that happened in your campaign that sticks out in your mind.
I mean, I haven't been in a campaign since I was in high school, but if you want to know the memories of D&D that stick out, it comes from living at high school, sneaking out of my room with the lights off, making sure that the proctors couldn't see it, sneaking over to John's room where he used the dungeon master and he had the whole setup, and staying up all night long, maybe smoking weed, but definitely playing Dungeons and Dragons all night long, and then being super tired the next day. But hey, life is good when you're young.
Were you affected by any of the satanic panic stuff? Did that impinge on your existence in any way?
No. I was pretty sheltered from that. I found out about that afterwards. I guess that's because I was in this private high school and in Hebrew school. That didn't really affect me.
Yeah. Because I did want to mention, I mean, also in Fighting God, you're talking about your mom, and you say, although she made me do so many, quote, Jewy things as a child, her love for me never wavered, nor mine for her. And I thought that was a really important message that, like, you're a hardcore atheist and she was obviously very religious, but you loved each other, and you didn't let that difference come between.
Yeah, and we were very close at the end. She was very proud of my accomplishments. She got to see the Reason Rally, which was my pinnacle. So she sought to see the largest atheist event in world history. She was front row center for it. And she was never an atheist. When she was dying, when she was dying, she asked me if I would say Yortzeit for her, the Jewish prayer for the dead. And I said no. And she said, why? And I said, because I don't want my last memory of you to be me lying. And she smiled. She smiled at that. And that was kind of cool. And I mean, I miss my mom so much, but She was super into me becoming a Jew when I was a kid, and then she kind of gave up when she realized that it wasn't sticking. And my father came out to me as an atheist when I was 35 years old. Jeez. But I could have really used his support when I was a kid, but I was 35 when he came out to me.
Oh, wow. Because you say in the book that he would call priests like whores and something or other.
Yeah, that's when he came out. That's when he started.
That's when you were 35.
Me, yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I was imagining that the whole time you were growing up, there was sort of this butting of heads in your house.
No. He was a yes man to my mother. He let my mother push me into Hebrew school, and he did not fight back at all. And I really wish he had, but he didn't. So
it was also really striking to me in the sort of appendix to Fighting God. You have this letter that you wrote to Randall Terry. Is that his name?
Operation Rescue guy.
Yeah. So like a super hardcore pro-life activist.
Yeah.
Proposing that you put out a joint statement. I thought that was also kind of a striking detail that you were willing to work with, like anybody across the political spectrum, no matter how profound your philosophical disagreements were, in order to get things done.
Yeah, well, politics does make strange bedfellows, and I still have religious friends. I still keep in touch. I just did an episode with I just did an episode with one of my former debating opponents whose name escapes me. But I love these people. They're good people. They're just wrong. Okay. For the most part, they're good people. They're just wrong. And
he's like a conservative Christian, if that's not clear.
Randall Terry was a conservative Christian.
Well, but this guy, I watched I can't think of his name, but the YouTube interview you just did, that guy's also a conservative Christian that you.
Yeah, he's a preacher. What's his name? Alex McFarland. So Alex McFarland's a good guy. And I've known him for years, and I debated him, half a dozen times. But he's a good guy. He's just wrong. And I'm not willing to say, that somebody is a bad person because they're wrong. Because guess what? I'm wrong about a bunch of things. And I don't want anybody thinking I'm bad or stupid because I'm wrong about something. And so I don't want to be the guy who says, well, somebody is wrong about something, therefore they're bad or stupid. They're not. They're just wrong. And that's all right.
I think that's a really good note to end on. And we're pretty much out of time, so we should start wrapping this up. I am curious, though, Dave, if you have any other final thoughts, or will we see any other science fiction from you in the future?
I hope so. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm going to be a science fiction writer. This was a story that came from a lot of experiences of mine, and so it may be a one-off. This is a concise story. It doesn't have a universe attached to it. It's a complete story as a novella. Will I do more? I'm not sure. But I will say that I really had a good time writing it, and I'm really proud of the way Darkshiner turned out. I'm very grateful to you, David, for reading Fighting God. And I hope that the people will, I hope you enjoy Darkshiner. I hope people enjoy it. I think they will.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. I mean, especially if for your first work of fiction, I thought it was really impressive. And as you say, maybe this kind of novel, creative approach that you took to it played a role in that. But I thought that it really, you have this amazing life experience with the atheist activism and everything. And I thought that you were really able to draw on that to tell this, to just bring a lot of sort of maturity and perspective to this story of kind of atheism versus religion, and just really, do it in a more developed way. Have the ideas, present the ideas in a more developed way, and really get into some of those nuances. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and
thank you so much.
If you ever write any more science fiction, definitely let me know. I'll be happy to read more.
Absolutely, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on, David. And thank you so much.
Yeah. So we've been speaking with David P. Silverman, about his science fiction novella, Darkshiner. So, David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
And that was our interview. So big thanks again to David P. Silverman for joining us on the show. Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoy the show and want it to continue, please support us on Patreon over at patreon.com/geeks or via PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. All right, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.